Hey guys, I was thinking about the story of my life as far as HVAC, and a couple of guys have asked how I came up in the business, so I thought I'd take the time to answer that. I first went on a job site, HVAC, doing install. It was a commercial job. I believe the year was 1993 or 94. I think it might have been 94. I was 14 years old, I believe, and I was building little metal boxes, I believe, for my father, like supply boxes, little box with a collar on it. And I was building boxes for him for a little commercial job, and I want to say it was a doctor's office or something like that. It's been a long time ago. And that's how I got started. I started working in the summertime. Back then, I played high school baseball. I was real big into baseball and music. I was in a band, and I was in a band in high school. That band was named Talyn. That's where my name comes from. So I used my paychecks in the summertime. I bought my first guitar. It was a Takamine acoustic electric guitar, the first one I ever purchased on my own. As I recall, it was $620 back then. So it was a relatively expensive guitar for someone like me. But I saved up over several weeks. I had put it on layaway at a store called the Music Loft in Wilmington. And I finally paid it off, and I got my guitar. And one of the heartbreaking things about that guitar is years later, in January of this year, when I had the fire at my house, that guitar was destroyed, which it really upset me because of the long history I've had with that particular instrument. And things come and things go, but that was a hard one to swallow because I had it for so long. I had it for 20 years. I worked in the field install over the summer. After I graduated high school, I went to college for about a year. I was in college for about a year with no real direction. Good grades. I believe my college, I had a 3.5 at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, which I think that's an A. I'm not sure. It's been a long time. I was there for about a year, didn't really have a direction, so I decided to go work for my father. That was 1998. I started working for my father. I did installs for him. No real service then. Every now and then you'd do something service-wise, but I definitely wasn't a service technician by any stretch of the imagination. So I worked for him for years and years. I worked for him, from 94 all the way to 2009. 2009 is when I started my business. Now, I did some service work for him years after I started working for him. But most of the time I was doing installation because as time went by, his company grew, and there was about 10 employees, and I had a crew, and my brother had a crew. And I'd run a crew, and we did houses, installs. We had subdivisions. We do one after the other, installs, stuff like that. And eventually we starting them up, doing more service, troubleshooting stuff. But it kind of came with time. And there was no real training for me as far as service. It's sort of, he'd tell me to go fix something. I'd have no idea how to fix it. I'd breeze through it, try to figure it out. Sometimes I could, sometimes I couldn't because I had no knowledge in the area. Eventually I took it on myself to read more, study more, and become a service technician. To this day, that's how I do things. I kind of reason things out. I'll watch YouTube videos. I'll read books, and I have a few books that I really like to read. But that's how I came up. I didn't have any school as far as trade school. I just never went that route. It probably took me longer to get to the same point because trade school probably would have streamlined my education instead of being out in the field. But being out in the field gave me a good look at how things really are. You look at things in a classroom and you have these parameters that are not duplicated in the field, because in the field everything's messed up and old and mismatched, and got the wrong size piping, has the wrong piston in it, TXV doesn't half work. Everything in the field is compromised because that's where it's at. The best day for a machine is typically the first day. Then it gets dirty, then things start to break. So it was a learning experience. And service has been the thing that I love the most. I just love doing service. Install, I don't get fired up over installs, but service I just love to do. If I have a day full of service calls, I'm a happy guy. If I have an install, I'm like, Installs are good money, for sure, but when it's all said and done, I'm going to be a service technician. That's how I'm going to run my business. In fact, my business is going more and more each day toward doing only service, which I just love it. I feel good when I wake up in the morning and I have service calls, and that's all I got to do. So it's what I enjoy. But so I got into service, in 2008, 2007, 2008, 2009 roll around, and the economy started to take a dump, and it has been for a while. The housing prices were so high. All these houses we were doing were $400,000 and $500,000 houses that if you bought them today, they would sell for about half of that. But everything was so inflated, 2005, 2006, 2007, and finally had that housing bust, and everybody's business just went to shit all of a sudden. Everything was messed up. Everybody's houses were losing value. Everybody was losing money. The stock market was going down. It was just a horrible time. The recession was in full bloom. So, of course, the 10 employees from Father's business started to go bloop, 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 bloop. And it was just, at the end, me and my brother and my father again. But things were so bad, that was in jeopardy. So, one day my father said, well, we're just going to have to do things a little differently. We're going to split up, sort of, not split up permanently. His idea was to split up. Everybody had their own insurance, sort of had their own company. But we'd still work together to save money. He wanted to save money on payroll, taxes, things like that. Because everything was in the shitter. Nothing was going well. No one had any money. People weren't spending money on installation, which, remember, at the time, it was mostly installation. So people weren't doing it anymore. They were getting their stuff serviced, getting it repaired. So 2009 comes, and, we all have our own little businesses. Except I took it a step further. I'm the kind of guy, and it's just the way I am. I sort of took to running my own business real well. At first, I thought I wouldn't like that variability in income. I wouldn't like not getting the same amount every week. Not saying that, my father's going to say, well, you work this amount, you're getting paid your paycheck. And I realized that running my own business and having that instability actually appealed to me. I actually liked it. I didn't realize how much of a person, like a risk-taking person that I was, but it turns out that I took to that, and that was my personality. I like forging ahead in business, coming up with ideas, a way to make money. That was 2009, that was 2015, 6 years later. And I'd love to say that everything's smooth sailing all the time, but it's not. 2015 has been a down year for my business. The last couple months have been sort of a steep drop-off from last year at the same amount of time. And it's been rough. In 2009, I started the business. I started getting my own customers. So it started growing as a separate entity. So Town and Country Air was still working. The first year I was in business, I did mostly work for my father. And then, skip ahead to last year and this year, I probably work with my father less than 5% of the time, if that much. I still do jobs with him. When they had to do work, because it's just him and my brother, I help them out. And then in turn, I call on my brother to help me out. I'm moving away from change out, so I don't need as much help anymore. Doing service calls just been my thing. I just, you do those alone. If you have some kind of, big compressor you want to change, you might get a partner or something complicated. But besides that, I just do them all on my own. And there's something to be said between becoming an employee and becoming a boss. I've noticed that the employees are all fired up with ideas. And they are willing to say, because I've seen this a lot of times, and this is maybe a little offshoot of what we're talking about, but it's still pertinent. I see employees going, well, if this was my business, I'd do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I do it this way. I do the job this way. I'd change things up. I'd be happy to do it. I could do it. I could lead this thing. We'd make tons of money. And I found that people are real fired up when they're not in a position of authority and decision making whenever they speculate on how the decision should go. They're really confident about what they would do. But what I've noticed, and I've seen this, dozens of times, is when that person gets into the position of authority, all of a sudden a caution comes over them and they're hesitant to make these decisions. I.e., someone says, the guy comes to the job site and says, I want you to set this air handler right here. I want you to run, 18-inch duct. I want you to reduce it after about 10 feet, put a couple runs off of that, and they explain the duct system. And the guy's like, you sure you want me to do that? I could do this way. I could do it this way. But when it gets time for him to design and take over the job, he's way more cautious. And all of a sudden, and I've seen this before, all of a sudden they're looking for opinions to support their opinion where they never did that before. All of a sudden it's like, hey, should I turn the duct right here? Should we go to 16-inch round? Should we go to 16 by 8 duct here? It takes some getting used to being the boss. I happen to really like it. I don't mind making decisions. I don't mind taking chances, for better or for worse. Some of them pay off big, and some of them, don't pay off at all. But I love the trade. And 20 years from now, I'll still be doing this because I enjoy it. I tell my wife and my family that I'm going to work. And my wife said, and she's talking to my children, said, well, Daddy's going to work until he dies. And they're like, why? I said, that's what Daddy wants to do. And that's what I want to do. I mean, if I don't go to work, I'm sitting at home like, I have to do a YouTube video or something because I have to put something in its place, some sort of production. So if you see me producing YouTube videos and releasing them in the middle of the day, it's because I didn't have any work that day or I had to do something else. And we'll get into that in a minute, why I'd be home in the middle of the day. And I had to fill that void with some sort of production, whether it be YouTube. I'm trying to think of some way that, I'd write letters to customers, maybe, remind them, like recently I remind them, say, try combustion analysis. It's a good idea to keep your machine upkeep every year. Now, not a lot of people do it, but some customers do take that to heart and say, we'll want ours checked every year, which is a smart decision. But like I said, people haven't done it for years and, they didn't die. But it's a good idea because you catch a lot of stuff. You need the adjustment as far as gas pressure, your air getting in, how lean or rich you're running, your furnace. It's just a good idea. And some of them, like Steve says, the oil furnaces, they have to be serviced every year because of the filters and the nozzles get so gummed up. But let's go back to switching from install to service. Now, my situation is a little different than a lot of you guys because in my house, I'm the only one that can drive a car. My wife can't drive a car any longer. 2013, I was home one day and I was watching TV while my wife was getting ready for work. And, I heard a thud and I didn't think anything about it. Then all of a sudden I didn't hear any other sounds in the room and I went in there to find out that my wife was on the floor and she was seizing on the floor. Now, at the time, I didn't know what was going on, so I didn't know if she, had a heart attack, had some sort of stroke. I didn't know if she was going to die or not die. I didn't know anything about that, so I called an ambulance, and the ambulance arrived, and they took her back, and they said, well, we think she had an anxiety issue, or it might have been a seizure. It turns out that she was diagnosed with epilepsy after that, which meant she could no longer drive a car. She would have to be seizure-free for 6 months in order to drive a car. So I took over, and for a while, she would still drive every now and then. And, eventually I sat down one day, because we were under so much pressure to get things done. I had to work. She had to figure out what she was going to do. I took her to work for a while, and it was a compromise, and it worked poorly, and everybody was overloaded. It just, nobody was coming through that in a good way. It was a difficult situation. So, eventually, I said, you know what, you're not driving anymore. We're not working anymore. I mean, it's not worth it. The money that it takes to put the kids in daycare is almost equal to the amount of money you produce. The only good thing about what she produced was that she had health insurance, which was, a real bummer because health insurance is so expensive. Thanks, Obama. Appreciate it. Obama's done wonders for our health insurance and tax system. I can go ahead and vouch for that. As I got my huge tax bill recently. People always say that they're there for the middle class, but if that's not a crock of shit, I don't know what is. I mean, I'm not a very political man, and I don't say I like Republicans, I like Democrats. I don't do all that because I don't really believe any of it. Whenever they're speaking, I just do not believe a word they're saying because they're all just putting some sort of image they want us to believe and say whatever they want us. They think we want to hear, and it's like listening to used car salesman, and it makes my skin crawl. And it just, for better or for worse, I know people have to be politically involved because it's all about helping our country and putting our country in the right direction. But to me, it's like trying to see, which one of the wolves you want to pick to be on your side. It's just too difficult because they're all so willing to misrepresent what they're doing or to hide it or put it in this wonderful light that looks, their awful plan looks great. So I can't hardly watch it anymore. I can't hardly listen to the news. I used to listen to talk radio. I can't hardly listen to it because it's just, I just can't stand it. I just can't stand politics. But get off the subject. So my wife was diagnosed with epilepsy, so she was no longer driving, and so the business it had to evolve. At the time, I would do installs, I would do duct work, I would do all these bigger jobs, but it got to be that it was way too much to handle because, like I've told some of my buddies, some of these things are like if you hold them in, you feel like an island. It feels very lonely, and you have to express yourself. And that's in business. That's in your personal life. You have to be able to let things go and talk about things, or else it just bottles up. And I was a person that always handled all of my stuff. I didn't dump it on anybody. I didn't want to ever dump it on anybody. But it comes to a point where you're going to have enough shit going on that you're going to have to do that. So we had to deal with it. There wasn't any not deal with it. You can't go around it. They didn't give her any sort of disability for having epilepsy. I don't know why that is. I don't understand that. But we're not here. Getting money from the government is I'm not a big fan of that anyway. So it didn't break my heart, but I was just wondering why it would be that someone like her wouldn't get it when I see so many people that do get it. But like I said, money from the government, they can keep it. They take plenty of mine, so they ought to be good to go. So time went by, and that's why the business began to evolve into service, because I would get random calls during the day that my wife had an issue, what we call episodes or seizures, because she would still have them from time to time. So I would have to come home, and the schedule would get changed and messed up. So doing big installs was no longer, it wasn't really good for the business because I couldn't do a good job at it. And people would be like, why are you leaving? Don't you care about my air conditioner? And because of all the stuff going on in my head, I'm going, I don't give a shit about your air conditioner right now because I had worse problems. But I can't run a business that way. So I switched to service. Service is it's much more easier for the schedule because even if I had to go home for a little while, I can come back and take care of things. Installs, it's very difficult to do that. So that's where I'm at. It's very difficult parameters for running a business. But like I said, I love the business and I'm going to make it work. And I'm constantly working on ways to make it work. She still has issues to this day. And she'll continue to have issues every now and then. But we have people that help us out at the school, taking my kids home. It's been a real blessing. Because if I had to go pick them up, it really would be horrible. I take them to school every morning. So my day doesn't really get started until around 8:15 or 8:30 because I drive them to school every morning. And I've done that since they went to school. I used to eat breakfast at the cafeteria with them. It's just a time that you can bond with your kids, spend time with them, and really enjoy each other's company. And it gives you a chance to slow down. Because everything is so frantic, trying to cram things in. You just got to slow down. And it's not a race. If people are racing and they're putting pressure on all their guys, and it's just pressure, you got to sell this, you got to finish this, you're not going to get a good product. You have to take a little bit of time with it. Today, I was doing a job Saturday because it's a daycare, and I can't do it during the week because of all the kids running around. But I got there, and I was ripping this air handler out, and the air handler doesn't even fit out of the crawl space any longer. So I have it set off to the side right now to do whatever with. Grind it in half or whatever we end up doing. It's rusted out. It's very difficult, like taking it apart and taking it out piece by piece is very difficult because all the screw heads are rusted out. I mean, you might be able to beat it apart or something, but that's beside the point. I was in the crawl space. I had to crawl underneath a piece of ductwork with a new air handler, which was a 17.5-inch ICP air handler. It was a piston air handler. So I had my back pushed up underneath the ductwork and dragging the air handler with my other hand. And I was thinking to myself, man, this is great. I'm really enjoying this job. But you got to slow down. You can't get overwhelmed with all these it's difficult because it was wet too, and I was, my pants were wet, my shirt was wet. And I pulled the air handler through there, and I needed some unistrut and some rod, and I went back to my house and I didn't have it. It was at my storage unit, which is right behind me now. So I'm going to go back there tomorrow, trying to take a break, because no one's going to be there all weekend. Make sure the job is done right. Take my time. Sometimes things take longer. You can have a company that'll do jobs faster, but that is not necessarily the best thing. Having a nice combination of speed and quality is good, but quality is the number one thing. So I guess that brings us to this year. 2015 was a little bit of a down year. We're still forging ahead, making money so we can pay off our government debts. But it's all good. And that's how I've been in business. Still working to this day. Still going to be growing. The money per year has gone up. The very first year, way down here, $30,000 or $40,000, just miserable, up to $200,000 the last couple of years. So it grows. Stay pretty busy. I'm hoping that I top out around, in this part of the country, if I'm making around $300,000 a year, I'm doing pretty good for a one-man show, and that's sort of my goal, because that means I'm working all the time. I'm doing service all the time. Maybe do a one-day change out every now and then, but none of this big expansive work.